Hi, my name's Newman. Thanks for the opportunity. I am going to present on the topic of support role, an S3 pattern. And my idea is to present for about 5 to 10 minutes and then have about 5 to 10 minutes of discussion. And I prepared a document, which is here. And if you'll allow me, I'll read through this document, and it should take about 5 to 8 minutes. Okay. And if you like, please, I've shared a Miro board. If you like, and the text of this document is there along with some of the images. If you could, and if you come up with questions, write those questions down as I talk. If you're not on the Miro board, you can put them in the chat, and then we'll go through them at the end. All right, here we go. Support role. There is the link, and this is a screenshot of the role. And since it's small, I think I'll just read it. Apply the role pattern to external contractors. Well, now the role pattern is pretty huge. So Randall did a talk on this one a couple of weeks ago, and I like, oh boy, here we go. But we'll get into that. And here are the bullet points. Clarify and describe the driver for the role. Create a domain description. If valuable, implement a selection process. Consider limiting the term of the contract, after which point it can be reviewed and renewed if necessary. Build in regular peer reviews. And then as a note, it says external contractors consent to take on their role. And it also sees contract for successful collaboration. Okay. There's a few things that I want to discuss about that, but I first want to orient us all to where this support role fits in to the wider S3 patterns. This is for external, and my main point was that this is for external contractors outside of the circle or outside of the entire organization. But really, the first thing is what is the role pattern? And here is a screenshot of the role pattern, and it's interesting that one of the things that we've talked about before is that a role is a domain of one. We've sort of come about that, and it's in the thing. A role is a domain, and it can be held by one or more people. Okay. And then it talks about a driver. Clarify and describe the driver for the role. And here's our organizational driver statement. Okay. And then how would we clarify the driver for an external contractor? Well, we've got this domain canvas, which is a way to clarify a domain, clarify a role. Here is, and this I'll read because it's short and it's sort of explicit, says, explicitly clarify and then regularly evaluate, develop the design of domains throughout the organization based on learning to enable those with the responsibility for each domain to deliver value as effectively as possible to the customers they serve. This could also really be stated, clarify and develop the domain that you regularly evaluate and iterate through a process. This one is another one about describing the organizational drivers, and we've talked about it. It's actually really effective, and I'll read through this one as well. What is the current situation? What's the effect on the organization, and why is it relevant? I mean, and you know, these have been what will the impact be, and what's needed. It also talks about peer review. So all of these things are what all roles in the organization need. It's not just external. So I wondered what could it be that's different? So here's the pattern as it's written again. And so the first thing is, what is the difference between a role and a support role? And it feels like it has to do with this external contractor. And it may be worth discussing what do we feel is external. It seems like this could become blurry, but the whole idea, and this I feel like is a systems thinking, a systems design, this idea of a delegator and a delegatee, you know, accepting responsibilities, making agreements, which we'll talk about in the next pattern, and really consenting, which is I think why they or supporting the person taking on that role. And that's why you've got clarifying the driver, creating the domain description, making things explicit. This is something that I've written down in some of my questions that we can talk about. So that's the first thing. And so the next idea is that anyone providing value in the organization could, would, should follow some S3 principles, like driver definition. So even an external contractor would need to know about driver definition, or they might accept or be a part of peer review because of just the way the organization works, as well as time-based agreements and consent. Now, what might not be included in the support role, possibly, is this idea of place at the table or in when it comes time to decision making or governance. But it could, we would definitely want to include them in those first parts, like in the surfacing tension. I would think that anyone involved in the organization, internal, external, up, down, sideways, we would want to know about the tensions created, which I feel is a fundamental thing about the S3. So I'm coming to the end of my talky part, and I'm hoping to lead a discussion. And if you've had any questions, we can bring them up now. And then if you don't have any right off, I have a few suggested to get us started. Does anyone have any questions that are burning? I don't see any here in the Miro.
I heard you make a rhetorical question about what's different, and then all the things I heard you talk about sounded like what's the same.
Yeah.
So my question is, what's different?
So yeah, the one thing that I think is different is this this part right here, this place at the table for decision making, that an external contractor would not be involved in sort of possibly the over circle or the admin circle. But but that's, I don't know. It's sort of quizzical to me, because they're saying it's just like, oh yeah, you apply the role pattern to the external contractor. So who would be an external contractor? Because the whole idea is that the circles are become contractors for other circles. And in my mind, is that we delegate responsibility. You can delegate responsibility. Yeah, you can delegate to a delegatee. They become a role or a domain, and they provide service like deliverables, and they are working under a driver, and they do some of these S3 patterns, like what we're talking about here, like peer review and doing things like the limited terms, etc. So yeah, that was that was the one that stuck out to me. We could look at the fact that this is in the enablers of co-creation. This might spur some conversation because it's in this category along with like involve those affected. Okay, I see Tevo's hand up. Go ahead, I think.
Yeah, the table you shared, that was a pretty good one because you mentioned somewhere like system thinking, and then I was like, I remember something, and opened up the relationship schemas, and under there you have also role definition, but it's also that same relationship schemas here. It's list like 5 other things that are related to it. One is expectation setting that you covered, behavioral patterns, emotional responses, adoption and change. So, and that all kind of leads me to this end or the edge case of decentralization, in a sense that when you have, let's say, a defined role, he's, for example, we do businesses, we have this chief executive officer, and basically does anything until he gets like figure out, oh, I'm not that good maybe in marketing, so I'm gonna create a marketing role. But the smaller and smaller you get, at some point you get this very specific task or thing. For example, in a marketing role, there is a meeting who has a facilitator, and the facilitator requires a meeting note taker, but the facilitator themselves doesn't have the skill. Then you kind of lease off or contract that support role. But I guess it's vague because there is a difference between like how different perspectives or people use the support role. So it's always going to be vague. For some people, the facilitator is the first support role, and for some it's not. So it's always comes with the context, and without that, it's basically just a word.
Yeah, because that's this kind of the idea of like the definition of support, like like these facilitators or people that support a driver. For whatever reason, I don't think it doesn't really say anything about this idea of like a main role and a support role. It doesn't sort of make a distinction between like support and not support, like the main person, but that is interesting.
The word hierarchy keeps coming up for me.
Yeah. It more has something to do with the sort of internal and external, and so I'm sort of looking for advice on that. And Tevo, before we go to Nori, does that sort of is that sort of in your thought, like the idea of a support as somebody that assists or is in a different category?
Yeah, I would say so. And yeah, like the distinction between core activities and like is because that the core activities may also differentiate based on team, and then again you need the context.
Right, and that I think might be my sort of overlap. Like, what is a support? A support is someone that doesn't get invited to the table to make decisions about the main organization. They're just like there's a very clear contract, and this will get us back into agreements. And just by way of note, I do want to start the next one within the next 7 minutes. So I'm going to set a timer for 7 minutes, if that's okay. And then we'll make sure that we can get to the second one. Okay, Nori, go ahead.
3 quick things. One thing that brought to mind was if this is done kind of internally, there's a pattern I think called service organization, where there could be a function that isn't a core competency of circles, but another circle is formed to help them do it. An example would be like S3 pattern adoption. Like every circle shouldn't have that as a core thing, but there could be a circle whose purpose is to do that as a service to other circles, or it could be meeting facilitation, or it could be other things. But what service role, is that what it's called? Got me thinking of is things that are external. So they're things that you would probably not have in house, especially at certain scale, like an accountant or a lawyer, or things like that. And then that just made me wonder how, yeah, do they have to buy into S3 to like do these agreements? There's usually some other kind of contract or a service agreement with them. And the peer review I like to kind of build that relationship. So it's interesting that that's almost like a viral S3 thing to get it outside the org. But it does fit into the ways that an S3 organization should work around how you define the roles, how you define a domain, how you delegate all of that domain authority to that person that is external to the organization. So I like that. And I was just trying to think of who would actually be in that role. And I thought of like accountants or lawyers as kind of the two that popped to mind, but I'd love to hear other thoughts around that. Oh, and the other one, the last third point was they updated their driver definition. So now it's driver plus requirement. So I dropped that on the Miro board just because we don't have that anywhere in a single place that I've seen yet. So
yeah, this I did notice this. Yeah, this three, current situation, current or anticipated effects, and the relevance. I think that sort of, and they actually had a meeting and it really went into depth on all of this.
Yeah, and then that fourth box on the old chart is now the requirements section that's kind of expanded out.
Oh, interesting.
Around the impact.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to dig into that. Just as a side note, I've been seeing drivers everywhere. It's like every initiative should have a driver. If you do something, it should have a driver. And so it's like, ChatGPT. Turns out you can just throw a bunch of this stuff. It will organize it in terms of situation and effect and relevance, and then it will draft a pretty decent thing for you. Anyway, but to your first point, I did, this in this building organization, the service circle, I think that might have been what you were talking about.
Yes. Yeah.
Outsourced services require 2 or more domains. Okay. Okay. This is kind of, that's very zen, but the other one that
we use it for things like the team who maintains our Notion. Like every team needs it. Only one team should actually maintain, or the team that creates contracts for legal agreements for all the other domains.
Right.
Like that.
It might be helping team equivalent with a mandate to execute a specific set of requirements defined by the delegator. So this might be more of like, it's very specific and it doesn't sort of, I don't know. It responds to a driver and they have autonomy around that driver, or they've got like, we just need you, like there's very specific inputs and outputs. Like my accountant, I like give it access to my, financial records, and then it spits out what it needs. So there may be something there, but let's look at another one. And that's this one, contract for successful collaboration. Support successful collaboration from the start and build trust between parties by co-creating mutually beneficial and legally robust contracts. This is a little bit too over, wide of a net. And I will talk about this one in the next presentation on breaking agreements. Yeah. There was some question down here that might be good. Hold on, wait a minute. Where is it? Right here. What would be different for a contractor dealing with an S3 organization versus a non-S3 organization? And then I think we've been talking about this one. What's the difference between a support role and a normal role? I can't quite. I guess it's, it has to do with this idea of externalness. But what do you think would be like a difference between when you're a contractor, you're like, you get hired by an S3 organization, what would you think that would be like? And actually, you know, the Swarm as a service provider to other groups, you know, has that I feel like is like a support role. But does anyone have
Autonomy is
any
a question.
What's that?
Autonomy.
Autonomy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you have a different amount of autonomy if you were in the organization versus a contractor working from outside? Or would you have more autonomy in an S3 organization than you would working for a non S3 org?
I like the idea that Nori put up was about like, oh, maybe this is a way to go viral. You know, like to sort of like, oh yeah, it's really great to have a peer review, to do all these sort of things. Juan, take us home. What's our last question?
Thank you, Norman. Hey guys, so my apologies, I came late, but I am here. Anyway,
No worries.
now this question. So the contractor is, since I'm came late, I didn't get the whole thing. But yeah, is the contractor someone trained for S3 or not?
Oh my goodness. What is going on? The
That sounds
timer
very
played off
epic.
some music for you. That's great. All right. No. You're that's hilarious. No. Finish your question, Juan. Sorry about that.
No. My question was, since I came late, I didn't know the rest of the you know, the body of the explanation. But my question is, if the contractor is someone trained for S3 or someone that I mean, the audience is what I'm, yeah. Well, no, basically
Yeah.
what it is right. So both of them are trained as S3, but one is a contractor that comes to a S3 group, or the other option is to have someone that is from inside the organization providing training for the group. Is the way I see it.
Yeah. If it's sort of what I'm hearing you say is that in order to sort of do this pattern, then you would really need to train or to work with your external contractors so that they, you know, that they understand this idea of a driver, or that they, you know, that they get and fill out or are involved with a domain canvas, that they kind of understand that, hey, we're going to do peer reviews, or you can, you know, attend our governance meetings and surface tensions, or you know, etc. So yeah, I think what you're pointing to is correct, that there needs to be some training and some assistance to get these contractors up to speed, that this is how it's done with this org. Yeah, onboarding of contractors, really. If you'll agree, I suggest let's go on to the next one, breaking agreements.